Hello and welcome to this episode of Respocial Tomorrow. I am Jeff McKinney, CEO and founder of Ontegration. Respocial Tomorrow is envisioned to be a space where we bring on the Ontegration community hosts and our catalysts and other business partners to discuss how we come together in our purpose to envision a better tomorrow. Today, I am extremely excited to have returning guests that are here to discuss isolation and the challenges that people face in the workplace and what it would be like if there was a place where those resources to overcome those challenges were in place already. To jump in, I would first like for Reverend Dr. Omaran D to introduce himself.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Jeff, so much for convening this space. As Jeff stated, I am Omaran D, and I'm a pastor, a counselor, a nonprofit leader, and a strategic communicator. Wear a few different hats, and I'd like to make sure that what I definitely show up and do is support persons that are struggling with any type of areas of self-worth and self-progress, and just be present with them and walk along this journey in life.
Fantastic and welcome. Mrs. Poe.
Hello, greetings, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world watching this. I am Stephanie Poe, owner of the company Poe Coaching Consulting, author of the book Perfect Progression, and your multi-generational strategic advisor. I bridge gaps between generations and workspaces.
Fantastic. So we're going to jump right in today. I spoke a little bit about Respocial Tomorrow, where this came from. I'll back up a bit and talk a bit about Ontegration as a whole. Ontegration was something that came to me from having to endure these lived experiences that were painful and traumatic. I recall, as I reflect back, there were times where I felt alone, I felt unseen, and I felt unheard. And there were people that showed up to support, but there were also people and systems that did not. And that's both in the workplace and on the personal side. And so I'd like to first kind of toss over to Omaran and have him talk through, as he's supporting the community, whether it be from his congregation or his clients. What are your thoughts around the risks for the risk of not showing up and not supporting and not speaking up for those and the impact to the person who's being targeted, if you will?
Jeff, that's a great question. And we have to, with everything, there is a risk, right? And so what we want to do, and for me and those that work in the space that I'm in, and that's serving people, is mitigate those risks, right? So it's you can't be everywhere, you can't do everything, but it's about when you are able to show up, that you do bring your full self and that you're present with persons as they're journeying through whatever the trauma, whatever the actual issue that they're facing. And then the other part, really big in showing up, is that knowing where you begin and where you end. Sometimes we have to actually reach out as help providers. We've got to reach out to colleagues and other sources to actually walk further with a person. And that can bring great joy when you're doing those warm handoffs and knowing that you're helping the person move closer to their whole self.
Piggyback to that question, when people are able to find their way into your services, have you found that they've had struggles, or do they say that it was an easy process? What's their feedback like in the initial stages per your assessment?
There's a mix that's happening there, right? Some people have waited and they've debated on it and deliberated for quite a while, and they've parsed out exactly what they're looking for, and they know how to use some tools to get them exactly where they want to be. I've had patients to come to me that say, I was looking for a Black male that's married, that's spiritually inclined, so a pastor, all of those things, and it made it easy. So I didn't have to do anything to promote or project for them to look for me, to come to me. Then there's others that are just don't know where to begin, and they're just casting their line with a little bait in this big pool and hoping something comes out. And so that's where that second part to my first answer of fleshing out, am I the right fit to help this person? And if not, that's where it's key that I be engaged in community, much like one integration, right? Be engaged in community that's going to be able to support that person. I can hand them off in the right direction. And sometimes it takes a few sessions, a few weeks, or what have you, to do a needs assessment and to do the real discovery to see where that person needs to be, that they figured out that they get the support they need.
Stephanie, from your perspective, you're focused on executives in the workplace. You're focused on individual contributors in the workplace, both sides. And so you've seen executives that are doing it right. You've challenged executives that may have some areas of opportunity. And I'm sure the same goes for the individual contributors. Give us your take on the necessity of being proactive in these areas and the downside to not.
So you're absolutely correct. I do work with all, from the top down, from the bottom up. And I do challenge, because when we are growing, there's always new obstacles. And so if you are approaching those obstacles within your growth stage, in your growth self, then your response to those obstacles are going to require a growth response. Mm-hmm. However, we're still human. And we still have emotions, and sometimes things catch us off guard. But can you pivot from that? Can you get back on track? And it's okay to make mistakes, not a big deal. But living in those mistakes is where the downfall comes in. And so I will challenge, and I will ask you: is this really the route you want to take? Because at the end of the day, it's your life, it's your choice. Is whatever consequences that's going to come behind that you as an individual will have to face. I don't have to face it. So the pitfalls of that is that you have to live with those consequences. And most people are not okay with living with those consequences because they were not intentional with the choice that they made, nor were they able to think through it fully without the emotion to get to the vision. And the vision should be mission statement. The vision should be the company principles. The vision should be the company goals, because we're all working towards the same thing. Although we have different titles, we have different job duties and descriptions that will get us to that vision. That's going to be the pitfall. The pro on the other side is that you get to learn more about yourself. You get to learn more about what you can and cannot do. And once you figure out what you can and cannot do, then you get to realize that, you know what, I have a choice. I have a choice on how I'm going to respond. I have a choice on how I'm going to react. It's not neither good nor bad. It's just a choice. And the fact that it is there for you to make. Are you going to rise to it, or are you going to falter?
Wow. I can't help but think of my own personal experiences. You said that it should be aligned to the mission statement. What I found is the larger the organization, the more challenging that becomes. And so, how would you say your if you were to analyze when you're speaking to almost like that middle tier of leaders or middle managers, what would you say is the experience of how aligned they are to that mission versus whatever the political corporate tone is for that aligns with their own personal objectives, if that makes sense?
It does. And those are two great questions. So middle managers should serve as it sounds. Middle managers, they are here to translate in layman's terms what executive leadership vision for their organization is to their front line for them to demonstrate in behavior, operations, and definitely finance. But when it comes to their personal, political, or workplace politics, and even their personal social, that is in the mix, because what we fail to realize is that each individual person is coming in with their own personal culture. And their personal culture can be derived from their background. It can be derived from their belief system. It can be derived from their way of thinking in terms of how they grew up in the world. And they're bringing that over into the workplace. The middle manager is supposed to serve as the mitigator between personal and professional. That mission statement is critical because the middle manager needs to demonstrate that also in behavior so that the front line can replicate that in real time. There's going to be cracks in between that. There's going to be errors in between that. This is where middle managers need to let go of the ego, because the ego serves no purpose. And when they're driven by ego, because there's going to be some frontline individuals who are just, they're up to speed. They've been thrust into life challenges earlier on. So they're able to communicate, understand the communication, and also repeat that communication in such an articulate manner that it makes the middle manager go, wait a minute, who you think you're talking to? So when that happens, that middle manager needs to put aside that ego and actually give them the space and create that space for them to flourish. But what happens is that the middle manager is so caught up in the ego because they, as the front line, are not supposed to have this knowledge, but they got it because that's just life, something that many middle managers hadn't come to terms with. They have it. And so when they're operating in that ego space, the mission statement is failing. The goals are not reached. The vision is now blurred by their own personal ego and how things should personally be done from their perspective, their area of expertise and years of college knowledge. You see what I'm saying? So when that happens and they go back to their executive leadership, the data coming back could be biased. And the executive leadership is depending upon their middle managers to remain egoless, but they may not have articulated that in a clear manner that makes sense for managers to continue to walk a egoless path when it comes to performing the job duties and meeting and reaching the company mission.
Wow. I want to jump just right over to you, Omar, and to actually touch on this. I was kind of thinking about what Stephanie shared about things that happen that catch you off guard, and whether or not you're able to pivot, whether or not you're able to rise. There's a faction or a section or an audience, I would say is probably a better way to say it, of peers and other people inside of systems that kind of witness this either great response from middle management, or more than likely, from my experience, is that ego driven type of middle management. And what happens is you get to see how it impacts people. Have you noticed any residue, if you will, with the people that you serve, of them having to endure this failure in leadership, or even endure having to see someone else suffer through the failure of bad leadership?
That's a great question, Jeff. And Stephanie, I will take what you were talking about from a corporate structure and business structure and lay it right against the church. This happens very much so in the church and in volunteer organizations, where you would have the equivalent to the middle manager would be those that serve as officers of the church below the executive, which would be the pastor and the administration of the church. So, or the C-suite of the church, right? So what happens is those persons who have a piece of authority and power in that place, because they have all the keys to all the doors, they have all their signers on all of the bank accounts, or that they run or lead a ministry that they've led for 20, 30, 40 years. Any person that is new that comes in with any outside knowledge or any matching or knowledge that surpasses what is what is known or what is part of the tradition or the set polity becomes an immediate threat. And that's what causes the church hurt that we see happen, where persons exit the church, and then the church no longer continues to grow or thrive, but it begins to eat on itself and close. And so, what you see in a wave happening now is that in denominations where the churches that are connectional, persons are leaving those connectional tentacles, if you will, that reach and grasp and hold everything, that seep into every part of it, and they're going to more congregational form churches or individual churches or upstart churches, where those would be, and creating a church or a community to their liking. You take that and lay that over the top of fraternities and sororities or social groups, and what happens is that the leadership that is there, that has always done it this way, you have a new wave that comes in, and when it's pushed against, then it too in turn eats itself, because they exit and form their own chapter or form a new or something that is different to what the status quo has been. And that's just part of the human condition and culture. You even see that within the United States. The way in which the United States has been governed has been led over the last 200 years or so. It's pushing against itself now. The last 60 years of progress and change is now being uprooted because those who are in power, well, it happened 60 years ago because those who were in power were being challenged and starting to push against it. So now again, will it take another turn to redo itself, or is the egos that are there, they're going to cause it to eat on itself and it cease to exist? So it runs the gamut across all parts of life.
And if you could now talk through the challenge of witnessing these targeted type of episodes, or also having to not have a place to voice that you're experiencing or have experienced the trauma. From my perspective, I recall even being in connection with a therapist and still resulting in, now looking back at it, it was PTSD and disassociation. And Omaran, you were, actively playing this role with me to help me kind of understand this. I remember one time in a conversation, you told me, I was talking about how the difference between Jeff and Tech P, and you called me Jeff and said, Jeff, you're not the same. And I noticed now looking back, you didn't say Tech P, you're not the same. You said, Jeff, you're not the same. And I never thought that it was an opportunity that maybe Jeff was going to grow from this and emerge. I just thought that the residual was Tech P and Jeff was done. Later on, I would kind of figure this out, but I would like for you to kind of touch on this for anyone that may have gone through or had to witness any of these types of things, and what that kind of does to you if you don't actually go and find a place to speak out.
So I want to try to make it universal so it kind of captures and touches more persons, right? Not just in the workforce and workplace. Yep. But if we think about it in our own, in all of our social relationships, whether it is marriage, whether it is in fraternal relationships with siblings, or familiar relationships with parents, right? Those dynamics cause a person, when they feel like they don't have the room to be expressive or to be heard or seen, to either be eaten alive. I keep using this word eaten. I just finished lunch a little while ago, so I think that's what to be eaten alive, and to be overtaken by the desire of the system, or whether the family system or the structure that is there, versus them finding their voice and being able to be expressive and to live into it, right? So what's key for them is to learn how to, as you so well put it, the difference between Jeff and Tech P, well, it's really looking at that evolution. So I'm not changing, I'm evolving, I'm growing out from where I am or what once was, right? there's still the DNA and the fibers of Jeff is still there, but Tech P actually is this other part or this evolved part of Jeff. And so it has a more nuance and more understanding of what was, but then it is inquisitive and insightful to where we're going and what Jeff is going to become. So like in marriages, those couples that seem to butt heads or pushing against one another about being together in some things, what's happening is that there's an evolution that is happening. She doesn't look at me the same way. He doesn't respond to me like he used to. Well, there are other things that have occurred. There may be children. There may be job changes or increase. There may be educational growth. There are things that have happened. There may be weight loss or gain. There is age factor and things that are happening that cause that brings the person to say, my values are still the same, but the things in which that I'm looking to seek that validation of those, or where I'm seeking to see those be fulfilled, they have morphed. There is more to it than what it once was. I like to eat a good steak, Jeff. I'm going to eat one. Here I am back in food. I'm going to eat one, right? But there was a time when going to Logan's was when we got a good steak versus going to Ruth Chris or to a place, right? And so now, and what happens is those who you've been in relationship with that are used to you being just Jeff or used to you just being Stephanie, they said, oh, you've changed. Oh, you think you're better than. No, there's an evolution that has occurred. And so in order to not be enmeshed and not be seen, heard, or not valued, I have to be able to own that I'm evolving and I like what I like. I know who I want to be, or that it's okay for me to not still be in the same place. And from there, a good counselor, a good therapist, walking with you, or a person that is supportive of you making those evolutions, those changes, that's going to be key, because if not, then you stay being consumed by what has been trying to keep you from being better or different.
Stephanie, it looks like you had something to say.
Oh, yes. So something you said, you think you're better than. I am not a therapist. I'm not. And so my growth response is that you're right. And this is why. Because I am not responsible for your feelings. And I am not responsible for your way of thinking. You know you better than anybody. So if that is the case, and if that is what you think, who am I to tell you your thoughts are wrong? And so I can remember a time where people would tell me that, even in my personal life, as I was growing, that I think I am better than. And I didn't think that at all. I'm just trying to achieve my goals. I am just trying to get through life obstacles. I'm trying to get through whatever it is I'm going through to get to the next phase in my life. That's what I'm thinking. And I remember at one point in time being so offended. And how could you think that? And then feeling that offensive, I would behave in a way that would make these individuals feel like we're on equal footing, but we're not. And the reason why we're not on equal footing is because you didn't put in the work that I put in the work to get here. I put in the work. And on this train, on this journey, this is probably where you get off. And thankfully, I actually stopped and didn't shove you off the train. So I am not responsible for your feelings. I am not responsible for how you choose to think of yourself as less than. I can only demonstrate in behavior with consistency, follow up and follow through on how do you get past your own self-doubt through my own actions. So that's my response to that.
That's it right there. I'm gonna go ahead and log out on that one. That's it. That's it. Yeah, but Stephanie, I'd say this too. When someone says to you that you think you're better than, and your response is, I am better than. I would say really for persons who are just hearing that and they think that that's just banter or that's a witty or snappy comeback, the truth of what I hear you saying is that I am better than I was.
Exactly.
See, somebody, I wanted to tease that out because I knew what you were saying, but somebody else hearing that may think, oh yeah, she's stuck up. She thinks she's better than me. No, I'm better than I was. Hey, going to yeah, you remember when we used to make that macaroni and cheese out the box on the stove with those wings? Boy, we're much better than that now.
Yes, we've leveled up. And that is actually, I'm glad you pointed that out because I like to use myself as an example in any context. And this is a great example of how I choose to see myself. This is a great example of how I am using my terminology to convey a thought of mine. And more importantly, he's right. I am better than I was. And I am also better than this moment because the intention behind this conversation and behind my words is to share that I am choosing to be confident in my capabilities and who I am as of today in this moment.
That's right.
That is a choice that I am consciously making. And so I hope that others can consciously make that choice in their moments when they're faced with certain commentary or conversations that does not align with who they are in their growth space.
You know, I was trying to pull these lyrics up. I guess I'll have to just recite them as best as I can. You know, just listening to this, it made me think of, I think it was probably around, I'm going to say 2001. Oof. And there was a jam and it was filled with this energy. And the chorus was, I am whatever you say I am. If I wasn't, then why would you say I am? And that is exactly what I'm hearing here. And it's almost like from an artist perspective, which I discovered that Tech P is kind of my creative persona where I go in and kind of manifest the desires of my heart and really purge expression. And you'll notice in the background here, I have a book called Afrofuturism. I consider this me reimagining a more respocial tomorrow, and today is a manifestation of that. And so it immediately brought me back to, in this seat I sat, why a work colleague that I had pretty much gone down the HR path and made sure that we crossed the I's and dotted the T's and, you know, hey, this is what's going on. And this guy was, you know, warned. And here we were on this call with 3 leaders. I was working at Dell Technologies at the time. And this guy just began to curse and scream and all of these things at me. And in that moment, I just felt this. It was like this uprising. And I didn't feel safe, even though I was in my own home. And so my response in that moment was, you know, it wasn't the lyrics per se, but it reminds me of those lyrics because I responded back to him and said, hey, I am, specifically, I think I said, your feelings, or no, whatever you have just said has more to do with you than it does with me. And secondly, I do not need, nor do I seek your validation. And so ontegration and this vision that I had already kind of started this, but that pain and that outcome of being targeted in that system, not having representation or protection, how they would be complicit in watching each other traumatically impact myself. And I would even say indirectly my peers who actually saw that and had to decide whether or not they had the courage to speak up or if they wanted to, you know, kind of hold those things in, or maybe just prove that they lack humanity. I don't know. It really wasn't for me to judge. But I look at that and I hear in this time the readiness that we're demonstrating by having a platform such as this to tell people and to show people that, hey, look, you do have a choice to be proactive in your growth. And do understand that being proactive in your growth is actually going to step over the boundaries other people have because they haven't done some work on their side. And so it causes these type of reactions that you should be prepared for, all because you have proactively taken on the work, as Stephanie said, to grow and evolve. So, Stephanie, in your coaching practice, how do you prepare people for both sides of this reality?
By teaching them how to accept. Acceptance is one of the hardest things for people to do. It doesn't matter if it's a personal thing, doesn't matter if it's a professional thing. I have to teach them how to accept what is, because they're already living in what could be. And when you're living in what could be, you're going to create a resolution based on what could be. But what actually happens is the reality. And we're not happy with the outcome because we didn't sit in what is. So first, I have to teach them how to accept where they are right now in today's time. Secondly, I have to show them this is your behavior. This is what you are condoning, and this is what you are not condoning, and this is what you are acknowledging. Picking and choosing when to enforce policy is never okay. Because see, I've been documenting since day one of being hired on the job. So I don't know if it would be in your best approach to approach me with picking and choosing when I have operated within policy, for example, using my phone when I'm not supposed to use my phone. Everybody uses their phone at work. This is something we need to come to acceptance with. If we can accept that everybody is going to use their phone at the job or on the job, then we would be okay with moving forward with the next phase of conversation. But we're still in the hopeful stage. So if you're going to pick and choose when you're going to enforce in policy, I'm going to come out with all of my documentation from day one of this is what was been happening. This is the reality of it. I've just given you 3 months of reality in real time, date, time, whom, what, when, where, why conversation. Doesn't take much, doesn't take long. Now, what is your response to what reality is versus what and when you've chosen to enforce policy? And that's just an example. So acceptance, recognizing and acknowledging their behavior and the patterns. And then now let's get on the same, now that we're on the same page and we're on the same path and we can't pull wools over each other's eyes, how would you like to move forward? This is where you have a choice. I give you the choice.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to segue into the closing here, because Respocial Tomorrow and Integration is all about telling those people who drove the why and those systems that drove the why that we still have a choice to create a better tomorrow together. Jeff McKinney and Tech P, you can kind of see how that looks for us. We invite you all into the space, and we do imagine and dream of a future together with those who want to respect our evolution. And so, Omaran, can you tell us just off the cuff, when I say Respocial Tomorrow, and if you could paint your vision, what does that look like for those in which you serve?
That looks like a virtual place for persons that have to be very careful with counseling, offering counseling virtually and across lines, but that they can connect and have like-minded ideas in space or shared thought and process, and can engage with others that they find that there's comfortability and trust in that environment. Liken it to cyber group work, support work. persons that would be comfortable with being across the country on the other side of the world that can sit and know that there's somebody else like them more than that are experiencing what they are and can come in and share and never have to leave from their home or from their place wherever they are, and be expensive to engage. That's what I can see. It would, and then it's a room and a building of trust, a virtual building of trust where you can build real community.
Fantastic. I love that. To me, that sounds like feedback. That's really what we wanted to make sure that we were doing with our Respocial media and community as well. Making sure that the right resources were dispersed in a network across the globe to be able to, for us to curate those resources real time. One of the things that I would say that I've heard and that I experienced is that for some reason, those close to you participate in isolation from time to time. And it's so detrimental when it happens when you're at your lowest point. And, it's also something that you can see that those who actually pretended to support and love, but really, really, really had a different motivation, when you discover that at these low points, it's even more impactful. And so I want to talk to Stephanie out. If you could close out with or answer the question around what would tomorrow look like if we were successful in eradicating isolation?
Ooh, what would tomorrow look like? I think there's so many different answers for that question. I could just go back to the self. That's where I go back to self, because if you want change, change starts within. It doesn't start externally. And so personally, I don't mind isolation. I actually like it. But I'm also in a growth space. And I think if people become comfortable with themselves in a public space, in an isolated space, whether it's personal or in work, I think they just need to become okay with who they are and where they are, and understand that trouble doesn't last always. Understand that there's pitfalls and pains of life. There's obstacles. It's just life. But be okay with who you are, whether it's how you look, how you talk, how you walk, how you dress, anything. And if they become okay with who they are, then I think tomorrow it looks like growth, and it looks like a brighter day, and more of an example for the younger generations coming up behind us.
Fantastic. I think of isolation as, and you just opened my eyes, like it can be a choice. I previously, up to this point, only thought about, based off of my just recent experiences, isolation that happens when you feel alone and you don't know why. You reach out to people and they don't respond, they don't show. And then you have to have this, this almost like this gaslighting type of exercise to kind of go through and rediscover what you have inside. And so it does boil down to that. I would, before we jump, Dr. Lee, is there anything that you'd like to add to what Stephanie said, being the mental health professional here with us now?
No, I think what Stephanie said was spot on. And I think that, no, I don't have anything to add to that. That was spot on. Yeah.
Smart man. So to both of y'all, thanks for joining. If you could let everyone know how they can connect with you, that would be most helpful. We're also going to, as we produce and create more, you can always go to www.oneintegration.com. There's plenty of forms that are there for all of these different use cases, isolation being one of them. We call it the What's Up report. So you can stop at Oneintegration, tell us what's up, and then from there, we then connect you with the right resources. But if directly you want to connect with Stephanie and Dr. Lee, could you tell the people where they can find you?
Yes. I'm not good at that, Jeff, really, but you can find us at the Centers for Wellbeing, which is www.ctrswb.com, at reachoneteachone.org. You can also look for me. Find me on my socials are on. Just you put my name in. You can find me on Instagram and all the other social media spaces, or on LinkedIn just as well. See, Jeff, I don't have it down like that, brother.
Hey,
But
we got you. That's what we do at One Integration. So we good to go. That's why we got that front door with the form.
That's
And
right.
Lord knows that I will not be a practicing mental health professional. So I'm gonna be looking for the Omarans to pass you all off to. So Stephanie, how about you?
Yes. So you can find me, of course, at www.poeecc.com. That is my website. LinkedIn, Stephanie Poe, IG, Stephanie_POEECC. Reach out, DM. And I also am not being a mental therapist. I'm not that mature. So, yeah.
Well, fantastic. This has been a fantastic episode of Respocial Tomorrow. For anyone out there who feels alone, we want you to know that it's not the end of the story. It's perhaps the beginning of your purpose. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.